I am Hercule Poirot. Welcome to my new mystery story.
The Hotel Belle Étoile, perched on the shoulder of Mont Blanc like a jewel against white velvet, its windows glowing warmly against the February night. Snow had been falling steadily since evening, transforming the alpine landscape into a pristine wilderness that seemed to exist beyond the reach of ordinary human concerns. Within the hotel's elegant winter garden, a glass-roofed conservatory where exotic palms and orchids bloomed incongruously against the mountain backdrop, the cream of European society had gathered for what promised to be a most memorable evening. Lady Beatrice Winterbourne, resplendent in midnight blue silk, stood beside the evening's centerpiece, a display case containing the legendary Terre of Savoy sapphire. The stone, oval and luminous as a fragment of captured sky, rested in its velvet cradle beneath a crystal dome connected to the hotel's most sophisticated alarm system. At 52, Lady Beatrice possessed the kind of aristocratic composure that made lesser mortals feel perpetually underdressed, though tonight her usual serenity seemed touched with an almost imperceptible tension. "My dear Beatrice," boomed Sir Peregrine Vale, his steel fortune having purchased him entry into circles where money alone was insufficient currency. "You are magnificently brave to display such a treasure in public. Though I suppose, with Captain Martel's precautions, we might as well be in the Bank of England itself." Captain Yves Martel of the Chamonix Police, uncomfortable in civilian evening dress that somehow failed to disguise his professional bearing, nodded curtly. "The winter garden is secured, Sir Peregrine. All windows locked, doors monitored, and my men positioned at every entrance. The storm itself provides additional protection. No one could approach the hotel undetected in this weather." "How wonderfully dramatic," murmured Hugo Marchmont, the London society columnist, whose sharp wit had earned him both invitations and enemies in equal measure. "Rather like a stage set for one of those delicious mystery novels. All we lack is a convenient murder." Juliette Aubert, Lady Beatrice's secretary, cast him a reproving glance. At 28, she possessed the kind of quiet intelligence that made people confide in her without quite knowing why. "Perhaps we might discuss something more pleasant than hypothetical crimes, Mr. Marchmont." The conversation swirled around them like the snow outside, polite, glittering, and concealing depths. Celeste Varenne, the celebrated alpinist whose ascent of the Matterhorn's north face had made headlines across Europe, stood apart from the group, her evening gown an elegant contradiction to her reputation for conquering impossible peaks. Dr. Emile Keller, the Swiss psychiatrist whose controversial theories about criminal behavior had both fascinated and scandalized academic circles, observed the gathering with the detached interest of a scientist studying specimens. Near the conservatory's far end, Armand Leclerc, the mountain guide whose weathered hands had led countless expeditions up Mont Blanc's treacherous slopes, examined the glass case with professional assessment. "Beautiful stone," he remarked to Niels Eriksen, the Norwegian ski instructor whose Nordic features and athletic grace had made him popular among the hotel's female guests. "But beauty can be dangerous in the mountains. It makes people take foolish risks." Madame Yvette Duclos, the hotel's proprietress, moved through her guests with practiced elegance, ensuring glasses remained filled and conversations flowed smoothly. She had built the Belle Étoile's reputation on discretion and luxury, creating a sanctuary where Europe's elite could retreat from public scrutiny. Tonight's gathering represented the culmination of months of careful planning, and she was determined that nothing should mar its success. The evening proceeded with the measured rhythm of high society entertainment. Excellent wine, sophisticated conversation, and the peculiar tension that always accompanies the display of extreme wealth. The sapphire drew admiring glances like a lodestone, its faceted surface catching and reflecting the electric lights in mesmerizing patterns. At precisely 11:47, as if responding to some cosmic cue, the lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. The winter garden plunged into absolute darkness, broken only by the faint reflection of snow through the glass roof. For a moment, silence reigned, that peculiar hush that accompanies unexpected darkness when civilized people suddenly remember their fundamental vulnerability. "Please remain calm," Madame Duclos called out, her voice cutting through the murmur of concern that had begun to rise. "André will restore power momentarily. These mountain storms occasionally overwhelm our generators." Indeed, within 3 minutes, though it felt considerably longer to those standing in the dark, the lights blazed back to life. The guests blinked, adjusting to the sudden brightness, and began to laugh nervously at their momentary discomfort. Lady Beatrice instinctively glanced toward the display case, then froze. The crystal dome sat exactly as before, unmarked and pristine. The velvet cradle maintained its perfect shape, still bearing the impression of the sapphire that had rested there moments earlier. The security chain lay undisturbed in its careful arrangement, but the terror of Savoy had vanished. The silence that followed was profound and terrible. Captain Martel's hand moved instinctively toward his service weapon before he remembered he was off duty. Lady Beatrice stared at the empty case as if willing the sapphire to reappear through sheer force of aristocratic determination. "The alarm?" Martel demanded sharply. André Borel, the night manager, appeared in the doorway, his face pale with confusion. "There was a brief signal when the power failed, Captain, but nothing since. The system shows no breach of the case itself." "Impossible," breathed Sir Peregrine. "The glass, there isn't even a crack." Dr. Keller approached the display with clinical interest. "Most intriguing. The thief has removed the contents while leaving the container entirely intact. It suggests either supernatural intervention or exceptional skill." "There are no supernatural interventions in my hotel," Madame Duclos declared firmly, though her voice betrayed a tremor of uncertainty. Hugo Marchmont had recovered his composure with remarkable speed. "Well," he said with barely suppressed excitement, "this certainly elevates the evening beyond ordinary social gathering. We appear to have witnessed an impossible crime." Captain Martel took charge with military efficiency. "No one leaves this room until we understand what has occurred. Madame Duclos, please secure all exits. We must search everyone present and examine every inch of this conservatory." The search proved futile. No guest carried anything that shouldn't be there. No hiding place yielded the missing sapphire, and the winter garden itself revealed no secret passages or concealed mechanisms. The crystal dome remained sealed, its alarm system intact and functional. The theft appeared to violate the basic laws of physics. Dawn brought no answers, only a fresh mystery that would prove even more perplexing. As the first pale light illuminated the snow-covered terrace outside the winter garden, Jean-Luc, the hotel's groundskeeper, made a discovery that transformed the impossible theft to something approaching the supernatural. In the pristine snow that had fallen throughout the night, a single line of footprints led from the terrace doors directly toward the conservatory's exterior wall. The prints were clear and distinct, size 10 boots with a distinctive diamond tread pattern, and they approached the glass wall with purposeful determination. But at the point where the footprints should have turned away or continued around the building, they simply stopped. The snow beyond showed no disturbance, no continuation of the trail, no indication that anyone had ever stood there. It was as if someone had walked across the snow, pressed their face against the glass to peer inside during the crucial moments of darkness, and then vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the enigma of their truncated trail. Captain Martel stared at the footprints with the expression of a man whose orderly world had suddenly tilted off its axis. "This is not possible," he muttered, though the evidence lay clearly before him. "Nevertheless," observed Dr. Keller with scientific detachment, "it has occurred. We are faced with not one impossibility, but two: a theft from a sealed container and footprints that begin and end in unbroken snow." Lady Beatrice, her composure finally cracking under the strain, sank into a chair that Juliet quickly provided. My sapphire, she whispered. 3 generations of my family have guarded that stone. How can it simply disappear? Madame Duclos stood at the window, staring out at the mysterious footprints with growing alarm. Her hotel's reputation for security and discretion hung in the balance. More importantly, she realized with crystalline clarity they were dealing with a criminal mind of exceptional cunning. Someone who had planned not merely to steal a priceless jewel, but to create a puzzle that would baffle conventional investigation. With the telephone lines restored and the immediate crisis requiring expert intervention, she composed a carefully worded telegram to a man whose reputation for solving impossible crimes was legendary throughout Europe. If anyone could unravel the mystery of the vanishing footprints and the impossible theft, it would be the meticulous Belgian detective whose methods had become the stuff of legend. The message was brief but urgent. Impossible theft at Belle Etoile. Stop sapphire vanished from sealed case. Stop footprints end in unbroken snow. Stop your expertise desperately needed. Stop Yvette Duclos. She addressed it to Hercule Poirot, and as she sealed the envelope, she could only hope that the great detective's little grey cells would prove equal to a mystery that seemed to mock the very foundations of logical deduction. The stage was set for a confrontation between methodical reason and seemingly supernatural impossibility, played out against the pristine backdrop of Mont Blanc's eternal snow. The hours following the impossible theft transformed the Hôtel Belle Étoile from an elegant retreat into a gilded prison. Captain Martel's declaration that no one could leave had initially sparked indignation among the distinguished guests. But as the morning wore on, a more unsettling reality settled over the gathering. Each person now regarded the others with barely concealed suspicion, polite conversation replaced by furtive glances and whispered speculation. Lady Beatrice remained sequestered in her suite, attended by the ever-faithful Juliette Aubert, while Sir Peregrine Vale paced the grand salon with increasing agitation. Hugo Marchmont had recovered from his initial shock with remarkable speed, his journalist's instincts recognizing the makings of a sensational story. Dr. Keller observed the unfolding psychological drama with clinical fascination, while Celeste Varenne stood at the windows, her gaze drawn to the mountain peaks as if seeking escape from the petty intrigues of human nature. In London, Hercule Poirot was arranging his morning correspondence in alphabetical order when Madame Duclos' telegram arrived. The detective's eyebrows rose with interest as he read the message twice, his grey eyes taking on that particular gleam that indicated his mental machinery had begun to turn. "Most intriguing, Georges," he murmured to his valet, setting the telegram down with characteristic precision. "A theft that appears to defy the laws of physics, occurring in circumstances that would challenge even the most ingenious criminal mind. Footprints that end in unbroken snow. Either supernatural intervention or deception of extraordinary sophistication." Within 2 hours, Poirot had arranged his affairs and departed for France. The train journey to Chamonix wound through increasingly dramatic alpine scenery, but the detective's attention remained fixed on the telegram and the mental picture he was constructing of the crime scene. His methodical nature ensured every detail of the journey was planned with military precision. The Hôtel Belle Étoile came into view as afternoon shadows lengthened across the snow, its elegant façade perched against the backdrop of Mont Blanc's eternal peaks. Madame Duclos greeted Poirot in the lobby with barely concealed relief, her usual composure shaken by events that defied rational explanation. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot express how grateful I am for your swift response. Captain Martel has conducted a thorough investigation, but we find ourselves confronting impossibilities that defy rational explanation." Poirot's eyes swept the elegant lobby, taking in details others might overlook. The positioning of furniture, sight lines to various exits, the subtle signs of wealth and discretion that characterized the establishment. "Madame, in my experience, There are no impossibilities, only insufficient understanding of the facts. Before I examine the scene, perhaps you would provide me with a complete account of last evening's events." In Madame Duclos' private sitting room, she recounted the evening with admirable precision while Poirot listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When she described the moment of darkness and subsequent discovery, his grey eyes sharpened with interest. "The power failure was unexpected?" "Completely. Our generators are serviced regularly. The storm was severe but not unprecedented." "And the duration?" 3 minutes, perhaps slightly less. It felt much longer when standing in complete blackness surrounded by nervous guests and valuable objects. The winter garden in daylight presented a markedly different atmosphere from the elegant evening setting. Sunlight streamed through the glass roof, illuminating exotic plants and casting complex shadows across the polished floor. The display case stood exactly as left, its crystal dome gleaming innocently. Poirot approached the case with scholarly reverence, walking around it slowly, studying every angle. His inspection was methodical and thorough, encompassing not only the case itself, but the entire surrounding area. Occasionally, he dropped to his knees, examining the base and floor with intense concentration. Moving toward the terraced doors, he studied the mysterious footprints through the glass. The prints remained clearly visible in the snow, their abrupt termination creating an almost surreal tableau. Poirot examined them with the intensity of a scholar deciphering ancient text, though he made no move to disturb the scene. "Most curious," he murmured. "The prints suggest purposeful movement rather than casual wandering. The depth indicates someone of average build, wearing boots with distinctive sole pattern. Yet observe the spacing. The stride is economical, someone accustomed to snow. But see here, Captain, the slight inward turn of the left imprint. When we walk backward, we become careful. The foot twists just so." Captain Martel frowned. "You think they were made walking from the wall to the doors?" "I think they were made by someone who knew we would read them in the direction most pleasing to the story," Poirot replied thoughtfully. "But let us not be romantic about impossibilities." His eyes traveled upward to the conservatory's roofline, noting the delicate icicles adorning the gutters, and a narrow ventilation grate high in the frame rimmed with frost. His gaze lingered there a moment longer than courtesy required before moving on. "I shall now require interviews with each person present last evening," he announced finally. "But first, has anyone left the hotel since the theft was discovered?" "No one," Madame Duclos confirmed. "All guests remain available for questioning." "Excellent. We shall begin with Lady Beatrice, then proceed systematically through our cast of players. In my experience, truth presents itself best when approached with patience and proper method." Lady Beatrice received Poirot in her sweet sitting room, where afternoon light filtered through tall windows overlooking the snow-covered peaks. Her composure had returned, though her hands betrayed a slight tremor as she arranged papers on her writing desk. Juliette Aubert sat nearby, her quiet presence offering steady support. "Monsieur Poirot, I confess myself completely bewildered," Lady Beatrice began, her aristocratic bearing intact despite the circumstances. "The terre of Savoy has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather acquired it from a Russian prince fleeing the revolution, and it has never left our possession until now." Poirot's grey eyes took in every detail of the room, the travelling trunk partially packed, the neat arrangement of gloves on the writing desk, the faint impressions on a blotter suggesting recent correspondence. "Tell me, Lady Beatrice, why did you choose to display the sapphire publicly at this particular moment?" A flush touched her cheeks. "I had received several serious inquiries about selling the stone. The estate requires substantial repairs, and maintaining the London house has become increasingly expensive." Her voice carried the particular weight of aristocratic grief, not merely the loss of valuable property, but the breaking of ancestral continuity. Juliette spoke softly from her corner. "Lady Beatrice has been under considerable financial pressure recently. Certain creditors have become impatient. I thought, if potential buyers could see the stone's true beauty, the price might reflect its exceptional worth. You handled the sapphire directly, Mademoiselle Aubert. With gloves, Monsieur Poirot. She indicated the pair folded precisely on the desk. I placed it in the velvet cradle at 6 o'clock under Captain Martel's supervision, then closed the dome before he activated the alarm system. Poirot nodded thoughtfully, his attention briefly caught by the blotter's faint impressions. What appeared to be a list, though the letters remained illegible. During the darkness, did you notice anything unusual? Any sound, however slight? Both women shook their heads. Only the gasps and murmurs of other guests, Lady Beatrice replied. And the wind outside, of course. Sir Peregrine Vale proved a more agitated subject, whom Poirot found in the hotel bar despite the early hour. The industrialist's usual bonhomie had been replaced by nervous energy, and his hands shook slightly as he lit another cigarette. Damned peculiar business, Poirot. I was prepared to make an offer of £60,000 for that stone. Lady Beatrice needed the money, and I've always admired exceptional gems. His voice softened momentarily before hardening again. Now some clever devil has made off with it, and we're all under suspicion like common criminals. Poirot's observant eye noted a faint, dark smear on Sir Peregrine's left cuff. You ski, monsieur. Bindings are messy, Sir Peregrine replied promptly, laughing. It's grease, not gilt. I was standing beside Captain Martel near the palm trees when the lights failed. Ask him yourself. During the darkness, did you hear anything distinctive? Sir Peregrine frowned in concentration. A slight click, I think. Hard to be certain with everyone talking, but it sounded metallic rather than glass. Dr. Emile Keller received Poirot in the hotel's small library, surrounded by leather-bound volumes that seemed to reflect his scholarly disposition. The psychiatrist's pale eyes studied Poirot with clinical interest, as if the detective were a particularly intriguing case study. A remarkable crime, Monsieur Poirot. The psychological implications fascinate me. Our thief has created not merely a theft, but a puzzle designed to confound rational investigation. It suggests a mind that finds satisfaction in intellectual superiority over conventional authority. You examined the security arrangements quite thoroughly during the evening, Poirot observed mildly. Professional curiosity. I've written extensively about criminal psychology, and security systems represent humanity's attempt to impose order on chaos, to predict and prevent antisocial behavior. Dr. Keller's thin smile was unsettling. Of course, exceptional criminals find ways to circumvent even the most sophisticated precautions. The sudden darkness creates primal fear, disorients the senses, yet paradoxically can create blind spots in memory. The mind fills gaps, often inaccurately. Hugo. Marchmont, when briefly interviewed, proved characteristically animated. Absolutely fascinating case, Poirot. The theatrical elements are superb. The impossible theft, those mysterious footprints. I was standing near Dr. Keller when the lights failed, so we can vouch for each other's positions. As the afternoon progressed, Poirot's methodical interviews began revealing the complex web of relationships and motivations beneath the evening's polished surface. Each conversation added threads to the pattern forming in his mind, though the central mystery remained tantalizingly elusive. Walking back through the winter garden as shadows lengthened, Poirot's gaze traveled upward to the conservatory's roofline, noting the delicate icicles adorning the gutters and a narrow ventilation grate high in the frame, rimmed with frost. His eyes lingered there longer than courtesy required. "Captain Martel," he said finally, "I shall require a ladder tall enough to reach that ventilation grate. And please ensure those footprints in the snow remain undisturbed. They tell a story, but perhaps not the one written upon the surface." The impossible theft continued to mock conventional logic, while somewhere in the elegant corridors of the Hotel Belle Étoile, A criminal of exceptional cunning waited to see whether Hercule Poirot's little grey cells could penetrate the carefully constructed illusion of supernatural impossibility. Captain Martel produced the ladder with commendable efficiency, and within the hour, Jean-Luc and André Borel had positioned it securely beneath the ventilation grate. Poirot regarded the ascent with his characteristic distaste for physical exertion, but the demands of order compelled him upward. He climbed methodically, pausing at intervals to examine the glass framework and metal joints with scholarly precision. At the grate itself, Poirot's investigation proved immediately rewarding. The metal frame showed subtle but unmistakable signs of recent attention, frost disturbed not by melting but by careful brushing, and two screw heads bearing minute crescents where a tool had slipped during hasty work. "Captain, if you please," Poirot called down, pressing his handkerchief against the grate's inner rim. When he withdrew it, a dark smudge showed against the pristine white fabric, grease with the faintest glitter of metallic particles. He examined it with his magnifying glass before descending carefully. "Engineering grease," Captain Martel observed, studying the stained handkerchief. "Precisely. And observe how the frost has been disturbed by cloth rather than warmth. Someone has cleaned this grate recently, yet left it apparently undisturbed. The screws have been turned, though ice has formed in the threads, suggesting removal in warmth and replacement in cold, allowing nature to restore the appearance of long neglect." Madame Duclos approached with barely concealed anxiety. "We never service that grate except in spring, monsieur. Poirot. It has remained sealed throughout the winter." "Yet service has come early," Poirot murmured, his grey eyes taking on that particular gleam of understanding. "Most instructive." His attention shifted to the conservatory's interior arrangements, noting the strategic placement of palms and orchid displays. Near the crystal case, a particularly large palm commanded attention, its bamboo support stake rising elegantly among the fronds. With an almost casual gesture, Poirot tapped the stake lightly with his knuckles. The sound that returned was not the hollow note of bamboo, but something denser, more substantial. "Now," he announced, "we shall continue our systematic interviews. Each conversation adds threads to the pattern, though the design remains tantalizingly incomplete." Celeste Varenne received him in the morning room, her alpinist's composure intact despite the circumstances. Her weathered hands, Poirot noted, bore the telltale marks of rope work and harsh weather, calluses in specific patterns, slight discoloration where gloves had rubbed against metal hardware. "You have climbed recently, mademoiselle." "A brief expedition yesterday with Herr Eriksson's party. We returned before the storm intensified." Her voice carried the measured quality of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. "During the power failure, I remained near the orchid display. The darkness was absolute, but I heard movement, fabric rustling, and what sounded like a bird tapping against glass. Most observant. You noticed anything unusual about the other guests' preparations for the evening?" Celeste's pause was almost imperceptible. Dr. Keller examined the security arrangements quite thoroughly, asking detailed questions about the alarm system, and Sir Peregrine seemed unusually nervous, though he mentioned his intention to offer £60,000 for the sapphire. Armand Leclerc, interviewed in the equipment room among familiar tools and mountain gear, proved equally observant in his own way. His weathered face carried the authority of 40 years guiding expeditions through treacherous alpine conditions. "Those footprints outside trouble me, Monsieur Poirot. The spacing and depth suggest someone familiar with snow conditions, but the abrupt ending, that's not natural. In all my years, I've never seen tracks that simply vanish in unbroken snow." "You wear boots with diamond tread patterns?" Leclerc lifted his foot, showing edges scalloped with old scars but lacking the distinctive pattern. "I prefer nails for serious mountain work. Diamond treads are for tourists and hotel guests." Niels Eriksson, when summoned, presented a stark contrast to the gruff guide. His Nordic features and athletic bearing commanded attention, though his manner remained deferential. Most significantly, his boots bore the diamond tread pattern matching the mysterious footprints, though in size 11 rather than the size 10 prints in the snow. I was positioned near the fountain display during the blackout, Eriksson explained, his English colored by a slight Scandinavian accent, speaking with Madame Duclos about weather conditions. Just before the lights returned, I heard a faint scraping sound, like something being dragged across stone flooring. From what direction? Near the display case, I believe, though the darkness made precise location difficult. André Borel, nervous and eager to please, consulted his logbook with trembling hands when interviewed in his office. The power failure lasted exactly 2 minutes and 47 seconds, Monsieur Poirot. Our emergency generators activated automatically, but the main system required manual reset from the electrical room. The alarm system's records show no breach of the display case itself. The crystal dome remained sealed throughout. Only the brief signal during power interruption, then silence. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the snow-covered landscape, Poirot found himself once again in the winter garden, studying the scene with eyes informed by systematic investigation. Each interview had revealed new threads in the complex web of relationships and motivations, though the central impossibility remained stubbornly intact. Standing before the display case, he noted how the velvet cradle still bore the perfect impression of the missing sapphire, a ghostly reminder of vanished treasure. His gaze traveled methodically from case to terraced doors, from the mysterious footprints to the ventilation grate high above, where evidence of recent activity contradicted appearances of long neglect. 3 minutes, he murmured to Captain Martel, is sufficient time for the methodical criminal, but only if every element has been prepared with exceptional care. We are dealing with a mind that finds satisfaction not merely in theft, but in creating puzzles that mock conventional investigation. The truth lay hidden within the elegant confines of the Hotel Belle Étoile, waiting for the precise combination of logic and insight that would unlock its carefully guarded secrets. Somewhere among the distinguished guests, a criminal of extraordinary cunning watched and waited, confident that their impossible crime would remain forever beyond the reach of conventional detection. But Hercule Poirot's little grey cells had begun to perceive the faint outline of method within the apparent madness, and the great detective's satisfaction was evident in the slight smile that played about his lips as he contemplated the ingenious deception that was slowly, inevitably, beginning to unravel. The following morning brought crystalline alpine air and the kind of brilliant sunshine that transforms snow-covered peaks into a landscape of almost painful beauty. Poirot returned to the winter garden with renewed purpose, his grey eyes taking in details that had previously escaped notice. Captain Martel accompanied him, the policeman's impatience barely concealed beneath professional courtesy. "The ventilation grate troubles me, mon ami," Poirot began, his gaze traveling upward to the frosted metal frame. "Such elaborate preparation for what appears to be misdirection. But observe, if one creates a false trail, one must also provide the true path, hidden in plain sight." His attention settled on the imposing palm near the display case, its elegant fronds casting delicate shadows across the polished floor. The bamboo support stake rose straight and true among the greenery, apparently innocent in its utilitarian purpose. Poirot approached it with the reverence of a scholar examining ancient manuscript. "This stake, Captain. Note how it differs subtly from its companions." His practiced fingers found the joint where sections met, applying gentle pressure until a faint click echoed through the conservatory. The upper portion rotated slightly, revealing itself to be a separate component entirely. With careful manipulation, Poirot lifted away the top section, exposing a hollow core containing a slender metal rod barely thicker than a knitting needle. At its tip, an almost invisible hook gleamed with traces of the same engineering grease found on the ventilation grate. The mechanism was elegant in its simplicity, a precision instrument disguised as decorative garden furniture. Remarkable ingenuity, Captain Martel breathed, his professional admiration evident. The sapphire could be lifted from its velvet cradle without disturbing the crystal dome. The sounds witnesses described, the tapping, the scraping, these were the operations of this device during those crucial minutes of darkness. Precisely. But observe the sophistication required. Not merely mechanical knowledge, but intimate familiarity with the conservatory's layout, the security arrangements, the precise positioning of guests during the evening. Poirot's fingers traced the mechanism's components with scholarly appreciation. This suggests someone with extended access to the premises, time for careful preparation, and technical expertise. Their investigation led them through the hotel's service areas, where André Borel nervously produced maintenance logs and equipment inventories. In the workshop, Poirot's systematic examination revealed a coil of thin steel cable showing recent use, its end bearing minute scratches consistent with passage through metal guides. A small electric motor sat on the workbench, its housing recently cleaned but retaining traces of the telltale grease. Most significantly, a pair of size 10 boots with diamond tread soles rested near the entrance, their treads packed with snow that remained unmelted despite the room's warmth. The boots belonged to Jean-Luc, the groundskeeper, though their owner was notably absent from his usual duties. "Where might we find Jean-Luc this morning?" Poirot inquired with deceptive mildness. André's consultation of duty rosters revealed growing concern. He should be checking the heating systems, but hasn't reported since yesterday afternoon. His quarters are in the staff wing. Jean-Luc's modest room told a story of desperate circumstances. Beneath routine maintenance schedules lay a letter from a Marseille collection agency demanding 43,000 francs, more than 5 years' wages for a hotel employee. But Poirot's attention was captured by something more revealing. A notebook filled with precise technical drawings of the Winter Gardens layout, including detailed schematics of the ventilation system and careful calculations of angles and distances. Former military engineer, André explained when questioned. Alpine regiments. Madame Duclos values his technical expertise. He maintains all our mechanical systems personally. The evidence painted a compelling picture. Financial desperation, technical knowledge, access, and physical capability. Yet, as they returned to the Winter Garden, Poirot's expression remained thoughtful rather than satisfied. "The case appears to resolve itself, mon ami," Captain Martel observed. "Jean-Luc possesses means, motive, and opportunity. The mysterious footprints match boots in his possession, the technical drawings prove premeditation, and his current absence suggests flight. Indeed, the narrative presents itself with admirable completeness," Poirot replied, though his tone carried subtle reservation. "Perhaps too complete, too convenient. In my experience, Captain, when evidence arranges itself so obligingly, one must consider whether it has been arranged by design rather than discovered by investigation." He stood before the empty display case, his gaze traveling from the hollow bamboo stake to the mysterious footprints visible through the terrace doors. "We have found method and suspect, yet the central impossibility remains tantalizingly intact. The footprints that end in unbroken snow continue to mock rational explanation. And I find myself wondering whether we have uncovered the truth or merely another layer of carefully constructed deception." The morning sun streamed through the conservatory's glass roof, illuminating a scene where physical evidence pointed toward resolution, while the psychological intuition whispered warnings of deeper complexities yet to be revealed. Poirot's methodical examination of the evidence continued to trouble his orderly mind. The solution presented itself with suspicious completeness. Too neat, too convenient for a crime of such apparent sophistication. His grey eyes took in the Winter Garden's elegant proportions once more, noting details that conventional investigation might overlook. "Captain Martel," he said quietly, Before we conclude that Jean-Luc is our culprit, perhaps we should locate the man himself. A thorough search of the premises would be most illuminating. The search proved more revealing than anticipated. Jean-Luc was discovered in the wine cellar, bound with electrical cord and bearing a substantial contusion on his skull. His condition was serious but stable, though his memory remained frustratingly fragmented. Dr. Keller, summoned to provide medical assessment, examined the unconscious man with clinical efficiency. Severe concussion, administered approximately 18 hours ago, the psychiatrist announced. He has likely been unconscious since yesterday evening, well before the theft occurred. His recollections, when they return, will be incomplete at best. Captain Martel's expression darkened with professional embarrassment. Then our apparent solution dissolves entirely. Jean-Luc could not have committed the theft while lying bound and unconscious in the cellar. On the contrary, mon ami, Poirot observed with growing satisfaction, his condition confirms the exceptional sophistication of our criminals' planning. Jean-Luc was not the perpetrator, but a carefully chosen scapegoat, someone whose technical knowledge and desperate financial circumstances would make him the perfect suspect. The evidence in his quarters was planted with meticulous care to ensure our investigation would follow predictable paths. As Jean-Luc was transported to the village clinic, Poirot requested that André Borel assist him in a practical demonstration. He placed a glass paperweight, similar in size and weight to the missing sapphire, upon the velvet cradle, then retrieved the hollow bamboo stake with its concealed mechanism. With surgical precision, he manipulated the slender metal rod, guiding its hook beneath the crystal dome through an almost invisible gap at the base. "Observe," he said softly, as the paperweight rose without disturbing the sealed container. The sapphire could be extracted without triggering the alarm system or leaving any trace of forced entry. The sounds witnesses described, the tapping, the scraping, these were the operations of this instrument during those crucial minutes of darkness. The demonstration drew murmurs of amazement from the assembled staff, but Poirot's expression remained thoughtful rather than triumphant. Yet this discovery raises more questions than it answers. The mechanism required not merely technical expertise, but intimate knowledge of the conservatory's layout, the security arrangements, and the precise positioning of guests during the evening. He moved to the terrace doors, studying the mysterious footprints through the glass. "These prints trouble me most profoundly. They are not the desperate tracks of a fleeing thief, but a carefully constructed puzzle designed to baffle investigation. Observe their theatrical perfection, approaching the conservatory with purpose, then vanishing as if by magic. This is not concealment, mesdames and messieurs, but advertisement. Our criminal wishes us to marvel at their cleverness." With Armand Leclerc's assistance, Poirot conducted a practical experiment on the terrace. Walk from the doors to the wall, then return walking backward, placing your feet precisely in your own prints. When the demonstration was complete, Poirot crouched beside the final impressions. Note the slight inward cant of the left foot when retreating, exactly matching our mysterious prints. They were made by someone walking backward from the wall to the doors, creating the illusion of approach and supernatural vanishing. His gloved fingers traced the foundation where snow met stone, discovering a hair-fine score mark and a grain of pale blue paint on the adjacent mullion. These details he did not announce, but his gray eyes sharpened with understanding. By afternoon, Poirot had assembled all the guests in the winter garden for what he termed a review of our current understanding. The elegant social gathering had transformed into something approaching a tribunal, with each person regarding the others with renewed suspicion. "Mesdames and messieurs," Poirot began, his voice carrying absolute authority. "We have discovered that Jean-Luc Morel is entirely innocent of this crime. He was rendered unconscious before the theft occurred. Then evidence was planted in his quarters to ensure suspicion would fall upon him. We are dealing with someone of exceptional cunning who finds satisfaction not merely in theft, but in creating elaborate intellectual puzzles." Lady Beatrice's composure cracked slightly. You mean one of us is the thief? The evidence points unmistakably in that direction. The crime's timing, the intimate knowledge required, the careful preparation, all suggest someone who has been planning this theft while maintaining the appearance of respectability. More significantly, this person derives pleasure from intellectual superiority, from watching authorities follow false trails. We are dealing with a mind that views crime as artistic expression rather than mere acquisition. Dr. Keller's pale eyes sharpened with interest. Fascinating psychological profile. The theatrical elements suggest someone who wishes to prove their mental superiority over conventional investigation. Your professional insights are most valuable, Doctor, Poirot replied with deceptive courtesy. The criminal has created not one impossibility, but a series of interconnected puzzles designed to overwhelm logical analysis. The mechanical theft, the vanishing footprints, the careful framing of an innocent man, each element serves both practical and psychological purposes. Hugo Marchmont leaned forward with barely suppressed excitement. Are you saying we've been dining with a criminal mastermind, Poirot? Someone capable of such elaborate deception? Indeed, someone who possesses not only technical expertise but considerable knowledge of human psychology and alpine conditions. The snow was manipulated as carefully as the mechanical evidence, creating illusions designed to suggest supernatural intervention while concealing mundane reality. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the winter garden, the atmosphere grew, increasingly tense. The distinguished guests found themselves trapped not merely by Captain Martel's authority, but by the growing certainty that one among them harbored secrets far darker than social embarrassment or financial difficulty. Poirot's little grey cells were beginning to perceive the true pattern beneath the elaborate deception, though he kept his growing understanding carefully concealed. The criminal had created a masterpiece of misdirection, but like all such constructions, it contained the seeds of its own revelation. The game of psychological warfare had begun in earnest, and Hercule Poirot was determined to prove that methodical reason would ultimately triumph over even the most ingenious criminal imagination. The stage was set for the next phase of the investigation, where the hunter would gradually become the hunted, and the elaborate facade of respectability would begin to crumble under the relentless pressure of logical deduction. The psychological pressure within the winter garden had reached a crescendo, each guest now acutely aware that the thief sat among them, hidden behind a facade of respectability. Poirot allowed this tension to build with the patience of a master conductor, understanding that discomfort often preceded revelation. His grey eyes swept the gathering, noting every subtle reaction, every nervous gesture that might betray guilt beneath polished surfaces. Before we proceed further, Poirot announced with characteristic precision, I require certain small items for examination. Mademoiselle Aubert, if you please, the evening gloves you wore during the reception. Sir Peregrine, that soiled cuff you mentioned. Do not send it to the laundry just yet. These details may seem trivial, but in my experience, the smallest threads often unravel the largest deceptions. With Juliet's gloves in hand, Poirot examined them against the light, revealing an almost invisible crescent of grease at the forefinger and thumb, the same distinctive engineering lubricant found at the ventilation grate. He made no dramatic announcement, merely nodded thoughtfully and secured the evidence with methodical care. His next destination was Lady Beatrice's writing desk, where he requested the blotter with scholarly courtesy. Taking a soft pencil, he shaded the surface delicately until faint impressions bloomed into legibility. Repairs at Winterbourne, auctioneer's commission, Keller, contact in Zurich, Vale, offer 6065, discreet sale to Geneva House, insurance inquiry, silk inclusions in stone. Most illuminating, Poirot murmured, his attention particularly drawn to the final notation. Lady Beatrice, your grandfather was indeed wise. The Terre of Savoy possesses distinctive silk inclusions beneath the table, twin marks like crossed hairs that no recutting could erase without destroying the stone's character. You mentioned this to someone recently. Lady Beatrice's composure wavered slightly. I wrote to my insurance company, and I believe I mentioned it to Dr. Keller when we discussed gemstone provenance. He found the concept of fingerprints in precious stones quite fascinating. Dr. Keller's pale eyes sharpened with interest. Indeed, I remarked that criminals invariably underestimate such continuity. Physical evidence often proves more reliable than human memory. Poirot's investigation led him next to the hotel's electrical room, where André Borel nervously assisted in examining the power systems. Among the fuse cartridges, one showed clear signs of deliberate sabotage, its thin wire precisely nicked so that a brief overload would part it cleanly. The switch housing bore traces of the same distinctive grease found throughout the crime scene. The power failure was not natural, mes amis, Poirot explained upon returning to the Winter Garden. It was engineered with surgical precision, timed to provide exactly 2 minutes and 47 seconds of darkness. Sufficient time for a methodical criminal, but only if every element had been prepared with exceptional care. Moving to the hollow bamboo stake, Poirot appeared to remove a speck of dust while actually applying graphite powder to the disguised joint in the slender rod's knurled section. The trap was invisible, but would reveal anyone who handled the mechanism. "I have arranged for a gemologist from Geneva to arrive this evening," he announced with deceptive casualness. "He possesses intimate knowledge of the terre of Savoy's unique characteristics. Should anyone possess even the smallest fragment, its identity will be confirmed within moments of inspection." The announcement fell like alpine snow, each flake harmless alone, collectively transforming the landscape. Sir Peregrine's laugh came too quickly, while Celeste's mountain-trained eyes flicked instinctively toward exits. Madame Duclos rearranged her teacup with nervous precision, and Hugo Marchmont became radiantly attentive. Most significantly, Dr. Keller merely smiled with academic approval, as if observing a well-constructed experiment. Additionally, Poirot continued, "Jean-Luc has regained consciousness and will speak more clearly by 9 o'clock. Perhaps a voice, perhaps a fragrance, perhaps a single word will return to complete his memories of yesterday evening." The mysterious footprints continued to mock conventional logic, but Poirot had begun to perceive their true purpose. "These prints were not the desperate tracks of a fleeing thief," he explained, "but a carefully constructed puzzle designed to suggest supernatural intervention. Observe their theatrical perfection. They were created by someone walking backward from the wall to the doors, creating the illusion of approach and magical vanishing." As evening approached, the atmosphere grew increasingly charged with psychological tension. Somewhere among the distinguished guests, a criminal of exceptional cunning watched and waited, confident that their elaborate deception would remain forever beyond conventional detection. But Hercule Poirot's little grey cells had begun to perceive the true pattern beneath the illusion, and the great detective's satisfaction was evident in the slight smile that played about his lips as 9 o'clock approached with inexorable precision. The stage was set for revelation, and the hunter was about to become the hunted. As 9 o'clock struck with crystalline precision, word arrived from the village clinic that Jean-Luc had regained consciousness and was lucid enough for brief questioning. Dr. Keller accompanied Captain Martel and Poirot to examine the injured man, his professional demeanor masking what might have been deeper concern. The other guests remained in the Winter Garden, their conversations subdued by the weight of approaching revelation. Jean-Luc lay propped against white pillows, his weathered face pale but alert. The bandage around his head gave him a vulnerable appearance that contrasted sharply with his usual mountain-hardened confidence. His eyes focused on Poirot with the clarity of someone whose memory had begun to reassemble itself from scattered fragments. "I remember more now, monsieur," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. "In the electrical room, changing the fuses as instructed. Someone came behind me, quiet, like they knew the building well. Heavy gloves, I think, because the hands felt thick when they grabbed me." Poirot leaned forward with scholarly attention. "You noticed anything else?" A scent, perhaps, or the sound of breathing. Jean-Luc's eyes brightened with the effort of recollection. Oui, there was a smell. Pine tar mixed with ski wax, the kind they use for racing skis, and when they spoke— He paused, frowning with concentration. They said pas longtemps in French, but it wasn't local French. Someone educated, from away. The accent was careful, like they learned it in school rather than from their mother. Dr. Keller observed this testimony with clinical detachment, occasionally nodding as if filing away psychological details for future reference. Memory reconstruction after trauma can be unreliable, he noted to Poirot quietly. The mind often fills gaps with plausible details that may not reflect actual events. Indeed, Poirot replied, though his grey eyes held a gleam that suggested Jean-Luc's testimony had provided exactly the confirmation he sought. Nevertheless, these fragments often contain truth, even when filtered through injured consciousness. Returning to the winter garden, Poirot found the atmosphere charged with barely suppressed tension. The delayed arrival of the gemologist had created a peculiar suspended animation, everyone aware that revelation approached, yet uncertain when it would arrive. He observed the gathering with renewed attention, noting how Jean-Luc's testimony about pine tar and educated French had subtly altered the psychological landscape. Mesdames and messieurs, Poirot announced with characteristic precision, Jean-Luc's recovery provides valuable insights into our criminal's methods. We are dealing with someone who combines technical expertise with intimate knowledge of Alpine equipment and European languages. Most significantly, someone comfortable enough in these surroundings to move silently through service areas. His gaze swept the assembled company, noting reactions with the trained eye of a psychologist. Sir Peregrine's nervous energy had intensified, while Celeste maintained her mountain-trained composure despite a slight tightening around her eyes. Niels Eriksen listened with the focused attention of someone whose professional reputation depended on understanding mountain safety protocols. Most intriguingly, Dr. Keller observed the proceedings with the detached fascination of a scientist studying laboratory specimens, his pale eyes missing no detail of the unfolding psychological drama. The scent of pine tar and ski wax proves particularly illuminating, Poirot continued thoughtfully. Such substances are not commonly found in hotel corridors, yet they cling to clothing and equipment with remarkable persistence. Our criminal carries the mountains with them, even in elegant surroundings. Moving to the terrace doors, he studied the mysterious footprints through the glass, with renewed understanding. The afternoon sun had begun to alter their edges slightly, but their essential impossibility remained intact, tracks that approached the conservatory wall with purpose, then simply vanished into unbroken snow. These prints continue to fascinate me, he mused aloud. The backward walk from wall to doors creates the illusion of supernatural vanishing, but observe the slight inward cant of the left foot, exactly what one would expect from someone retreating carefully. Yet how does one retreat from a wall into nothingness? His fingers traced the window frame where it met the foundation, pausing at an almost invisible score mark and a grain of pale blue paint on the adjacent mullion. These details he did not announce, but his expression suggested pieces of a complex puzzle were beginning to align with mathematical precision. André Borel appeared in the conservatory doorway, his face flushed with excitement and concern. "Monsieur Poirot, we have made a discovery in the furnace room, a small bundle, partially burned but not completely destroyed." The bundle, when examined, proved to contain fragments of evening gloves, not ordinary social gloves, but specialized equipment bearing traces of engineering grease and minute particles that caught the light like captured starlight. The cloth showed distinctive Swiss weaving patterns, expensive and exclusive, while the fingertips bore wear marks consistent with precision mechanical work. "Most illuminating," Poirot observed, his examination revealing additional details. These gloves were worn by someone with intimate knowledge of delicate mechanisms. The burn pattern suggests hasty disposal, yet paradoxically, the flames have preserved, rather than destroyed, the most incriminating evidence. Dr. Keller studied the charred fragments with professional interest. Remarkable preservation despite the fire damage. The criminals' attempt to destroy evidence has inadvertently confirmed their direct involvement with the stolen sapphire. Indeed, Poirot agreed, his tone carrying subtle implications, though one wonders whether such preservation was entirely accidental. In my experience, exceptional criminals sometimes wish their cleverness to be recognized, even at considerable personal risk. As evening shadows lengthened across the winter garden, Poirot's methodical investigation had begun to reveal the true pattern beneath the elaborate deception. The combination of Jean-Luc's testimony, the physical evidence, and his growing understanding of the footprint's impossible vanishing pointed toward a solution of breathtaking audacity, a crime that combined technical brilliance with theatrical flair in equal measure. Yet the detective's expression remained thoughtful rather than triumphant. Somewhere among the distinguished guests, a criminal mind of exceptional cunning continued to watch and wait, confident that their masterpiece of deception would remain forever beyond conventional detection. The psychological duel had reached its crucial phase, where hunter and hunted circled each other with deadly precision, each waiting for the moment when advantage would tip irrevocably toward truth or continued concealment. The little gray cells were beginning to perceive the complete architecture of the crime, though Poirot kept his growing certainty carefully hidden. Tomorrow would bring the gemologist and final confirmation, but tonight belonged to careful observation and the delicate art of allowing criminals to reveal themselves through their own actions. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation between methodical reason and a mind that had crafted what appeared to be the perfect impossible crime. The evening meal at the Hôtel Belle Étoile proceeded with the stilted formality of a wake, each guest acutely aware that the thief sat among them, hidden behind polished manners and cultivated conversation. Poirot observed the gathering with the patience of a master conductor, noting every nervous gesture, every too casual remark that might betray guilt beneath sophisticated facades. Dr. Keller, seated across from the detective, maintained his scholarly composure while discussing the psychological implications of impossible crimes. The criminal mind that creates such elaborate puzzles often suffers from intellectual vanity, he observed with clinical detachment, his pale eyes studying the assembled company like specimens under glass. They require recognition of their superiority, even at considerable personal risk. The theatrical elements suggest someone who views crime as artistic, expression rather than mere acquisition. Your insights prove most valuable, Doctor, Poirot replied with deceptive courtesy, his gray eyes noting how Keller's hands remained perfectly steady while cutting his meat, the hands of someone accustomed to precision work under pressure. Though one wonders whether such psychological analysis might not apply equally to those who study criminal behavior professionally. The conversation drifted naturally to alpine expertise, where Céleste Varenne demonstrated intimate knowledge of rope work and anchor systems. Her weathered fingers traced patterns on the tablecloth as she described the delicate balance between calculated risk and reckless ambition that defined serious mountaineering. The mountains teach patience above all, she explained, her voice carrying hard-won authority. One waits for the perfect moment, prepares every detail with meticulous care, then acts with absolute commitment. Niels Eriksen nodded agreement, his Nordic features reflecting years of experience with treacherous conditions. In avalanche country, we learn to read the landscape for hidden dangers. What appears solid may conceal deadly instability beneath the surface. Most intriguingly, Dr. Keller's contributions to the discussion revealed surprising depth of knowledge about gemological identification techniques. When Sir Peregrine mentioned the difficulty of identifying stolen gems, Keller remarked with casual expertise, "Modern gemology can identify stones by their internal characteristics, microscopic inclusions that serve as fingerprints." The tear of Savoy's silk inclusions, for instance, would make it impossible to mistake for any other sapphire, regardless of recutting or disguise. Poirot's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. Such detailed knowledge seemed curious for a psychiatrist, particularly when combined with Juliet's earlier testimony about Keller's specific interest in the sapphire's unique flaws. After dinner, Poirot conducted a seemingly casual experiment, dusting the hollow bamboo stake's mechanism with fresh graphite powder while appearing to examine it for damage. The trap was invisible but would reveal anyone who handled the device during the night hours. Night brought opportunity for revelation. Poirot positioned himself in the darkened lounge adjoining the winter garden, where reflections in the glass would reveal movement without betraying his presence. Captain Martel's men took strategic positions throughout the service corridors, creating an invisible net around the conservatory. Shortly before midnight, the faintest metallic whisper reached Poirot's trained ears, the sound of the knurled joint being turned by careful fingers. A shadow detached itself from the darkness near the palm, moving with the controlled precision of someone intimately familiar with the mechanism. The bamboo stake was being manipulated once again, though for what purpose remained tantalizingly unclear. Maintenant? Poirot breathed to Captain Martel, who materialized from the shadows with professional efficiency. The confrontation was brief but illuminating. The intruder escaped with mountain-trained agility, leaving behind crucial evidence: a minute screw bearing traces of pale blue paint, a fragment of the same Swiss-woven fabric found in the furnace, and most significantly, clear fingerprints in the graphite powder. Small, precise impressions suggesting delicate manual dexterity rather than the rough hands of a guide or the soft fingers of aristocratic privilege. The morning brought additional discoveries. Lady Beatrice's suite had been searched with surgical precision, her insurance correspondence and gemological documentation stolen, papers that would delay or prevent absolute identification of the sapphire's unique characteristics. The window latch bore the same pale blue paint found throughout the crime scene, a signature as distinctive as a calling card. Most tellingly, when Juliette Aubert was questioned about the missing papers, she revealed Dr. Keller's remarkable interest in the sapphire's identification methods. He found it quite fascinating that the stone's internal flaws could serve as fingerprints, she explained. He even mentioned specific techniques for examining such inclusions under gemological microscopes. His knowledge seemed surprisingly detailed for someone outside the field. Standing once again before the empty display case, Poirot contemplated the elegant architecture of the crime. Every element served dual purposes: practical necessity and psychological misdirection. The burned gloves preserved evidence while appearing to destroy it. The footprints advertised impossibility while concealing mundane reality. The stolen papers delayed identification while revealing the thief's intimate knowledge of gemological science. "The pattern grows clearer, Captain," Poirot observed quietly, his grey eyes taking on that particular gleam of understanding. "We are dealing with someone who possesses not merely technical expertise, but academic knowledge of precious stone identification. Someone who understands that the tear of Savoy's unique characteristics make it impossible to disguise or substitute, yet who also knows precisely how to delay or prevent such identification." The graphite powder had revealed prints too small for any of the male suspects, yet too precise for nervous feminine hands. They belonged to someone accustomed to delicate manipulation under pressure, surgical precision combined with absolute confidence. As morning shadows lengthened across the winter garden, Poirot's little grey cells had begun to perceive the complete architecture of the deception. The impossible crime was revealing itself to be not supernatural intervention, but human ingenuity of the highest order, a masterpiece of misdirection created by a mind that found satisfaction in intellectual superiority over conventional detection. The psychological duel had reached its crucial phase, where hunter and hunted would soon exchange roles with mathematical inevitability. Tomorrow would bring not merely revelation, but justice delivered with the precise elegance that characterized all of Hercule Poirot's greatest triumphs. The stage was set for the final gathering, where truth would emerge from the elegant shadows of the Hôtel Belle Étoile, like alpine sunrise illuminating previously hidden peaks. The arrival of Monsieur Philippe Dubois from Geneva transformed the atmosphere at the Hôtel Belle Étoile from tense anticipation to electric certainty. The elderly gemologist's presence represented the end of speculation and the beginning of irrefutable scientific truth. His leather case contained the instruments of absolute identification: microscopes, spectral analysis equipment, and 40 years of experience examining the world's most precious stones. Poirot greeted the specialist in the winter garden, where afternoon light filtered through the glass roof with crystalline precision. Every guest witnessed this arrival of expertise that could identify the tear of Savoy beyond any possibility of deception. The psychological pressure was now complete. Whoever possessed the sapphire faced immediate exposure once examination began. "Mesdames and messieurs," Poirot announced as the gathering assembled, his small figure radiating formidable authority. "We have reached the moment of absolute certainty. But before Monsieur Dubois begins his examination, perhaps we should review the architecture of this remarkable crime." His grey eyes swept the assembled company with renewed understanding, noting every subtle reaction. This was not a theft of brute force, but of meticulous planning and intellectual vanity. Our criminal wished to prove their superiority, to create a masterpiece that would mock conventional detection. Moving to the hollow bamboo stake, Poirot's examination took on ceremonial significance. The so-called impossible theft begins here, with this ingenious mechanism disguised as decorative garden furniture. His practiced fingers found the primary joint, applying gentle pressure until it yielded with a soft click. But observe, our criminal is a perfectionist who thinks in layers. With methodical precision, he worked at the lower section, revealing a second joint painted so expertly to resemble bamboo that only the most fastidious eye would detect the deception. The section loosened under careful manipulation, and from within emerged a small brass tube, capped and wrapped in waterproof silk. The collective intake of breath was audible as Poirot broke the silk wrapping. Within the tube, nestled on velvet like a captured fragment of sky, lay the tear of Savoy sapphire. Its faceted surface caught the afternoon light, casting blue fire across the assembled faces, while its distinctive silk inclusions, twin marks like crossed hairs, were clearly visible. "Voilà," Poirot said softly, his satisfaction evident. The theft was never complete until safe retrieval could be accomplished without suspicion. A first concealment near the scene, to be followed by later removal when investigations had cooled. But the little grey cells, they do not cool so easily. Lady Beatrice gave one small cry before mastering herself, while Sir Peregrine's shoulders sagged with something approaching relief. Most tellingly, Dr. Keller leaned forward with what appeared to be scholarly fascination, his pale eyes studying the recovered sapphire with the intensity of a connoisseur. "The vanishing footprints of Mont Blanc," Poirot continued, moving to the terrace doors, "represent the crime's theatrical masterpiece. They were created not by supernatural intervention, but by someone walking backward from the wall to the doors, carefully placing their feet in their own tracks. The illusion of magical disappearance required additional preparation." His fingers traced the almost invisible score mark along the window frame's base. A guide wire, anchored here with a small bracket painted to match the trim. Fixed for a single night and removed at dawn, it steadied the backward steps and prevented stumbles that might betray the deception. The minute screw we recovered bore matching paint, transferred under strain. The evidence compilation continued with relentless logic. The power failure, engineered through a precisely nicked fuse. The burned gloves with their Swiss weaving and distinctive wear patterns. The stolen documentation that would delay gemstone identification. Each element served dual purposes, practical necessity and psychological misdirection. We are dealing with someone who possesses remarkable technical skill, intimate knowledge of alpine conditions, and sophisticated understanding of precious stone identification, Poirot observed, his gaze traveling methodically across the assembled guests. They move with quiet precision, possess educated speech patterns, and leave behind traces of specialized mountain equipment. Most significantly, they are driven by intellectual vanity that demands recognition, even at considerable personal risk. Dr. Keller's scholarly composure remained intact, though his hands betrayed the slightest tremor. A fascinating psychological profile, Monsieur Poirot. The theatrical element suggests someone who views crime as artistic expression rather than mere acquisition. Your insights have proven invaluable throughout this investigation, Doctor. Poirot replied with deceptive courtesy, his attention drawn to a detail that had previously escaped notice. On Dr. Keller's left wrist, barely visible beneath his shirt cuff, a thin line of pale blue paint marked the skin, the kind of stain that occurs when gripping painted metal under pressure. The silence that followed carried the weight of approaching revelation. Monsieur Dubois approached with scientific precision, his experienced eye, confirming the sapphire's authenticity through its unmistakable internal characteristics. The identification was absolute and irrefutable. "The pattern grows complete," Poirot announced, his gray eyes taking on that particular gleam of absolute understanding. Technical expertise combined with academic knowledge of gemology. Alpine skills merged with psychological sophistication, the ability to move silently through service areas while maintaining the appearance of scholarly respectability. The psychological duel had reached its climax, where truth and deception would finally separate like oil from water. In the elegant winter garden, surrounded by exotic blooms and filtered mountain light, Hercule Poirot prepared to deliver the final revelation that would expose a criminal mind of extraordinary cunning and ruthless determination. The impossible theft had been solved through methodical reason and psychological insight, proving once again that no crime, however ingeniously conceived, could withstand the relentless application of logical deduction. The stage was set for justice to be served with the precise elegance that characterized all of the great detective's most memorable triumphs. Now, generate the final section of the story, ensuring a satisfying resolution. Maintain the logical progression of clues and character arcs, delivering the final reveal smoothly while keeping the ending impactful and true to the detective's style. The moment of absolute truth arrived, with the inexorable precision of alpine dawn breaking over Mont Blanc's eternal peaks. Poirot stood before the assembled company in the winter garden, his small figure radiating formidable authority as he prepared to unveil the complete architecture of deception that had transformed an elegant social gathering into the stage for an impossible crime. "Dr. Emile Keller," Poirot announced with quiet finality, his gray eyes fixed upon the psychiatrist with unwavering certainty. "You are the author of this remarkable criminal masterpiece, a theft that combined technical brilliance with psychological sophistication in equal measure." The silence that followed was profound and terrible. Dr. Keller's pale eyes met Poirot's gaze without flinching, his scholarly composure intact despite the weight of accusation. For a moment, the winter garden seemed suspended between revelation and denial, truth and continued deception. "The evidence speaks with mathematical precision," Poirot continued, his voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "Your intimate knowledge of gemological identification techniques revealed through casual conversation about the sapphire's unique silk inclusions. Your detailed understanding of security systems, demonstrated through your thorough examination of the display case. Your academic familiarity with criminal psychology, which enabled you to construct not merely a theft, but a puzzle designed to confound conventional investigation. Moving to The recovered sapphire, Poirot's examination took on ceremonial significance. You possessed every element required for this crime: technical expertise from your early engineering studies, alpine skills developed during years of Swiss residence, and psychological insight that enabled you to manipulate human perception with surgical precision. The pale blue paint beneath your shirt cuff transferred when gripping the guide wire that steadied your backward walk across the terrace. The distinctive grease on the bamboo mechanism, bearing traces of the specialized ski wax that Jean-Luc so accurately identified by its pine tar scent. His gray eyes sharpened with understanding. The fragments of Swiss-woven fabric in the furnace, matching the precision gloves you attempted to destroy. Most revealing of all, your fingerprints in the graphite powder I applied to the mechanism. Small, precise impressions suggesting the delicate manual dexterity of someone accustomed to surgical precision. The psychological architecture of the crime unfolded with relentless logic. Dr. Keller had engineered the power failure through his knowledge of electrical systems, then used the darkness to extract the sapphire with a hollow bamboo device he had prepared weeks in advance. The theatrical footprints were created by walking backward from the conservatory wall, steadied by a guide wire anchored with a painted bracket that was removed at dawn. Jean-Luc was attacked and framed to provide a convenient scapegoat, while the stolen documentation would delay gemstone identification long enough for discreet disposal. Your greatest error, Poirot observed with scholarly precision, was the intellectual vanity that demanded your crime be recognized as a masterpiece. The burned gloves preserved evidence while appearing to destroy it. The impossible footprints advertised your cleverness while concealing mundane reality. You wished not merely to steal, but to prove your superiority over conventional detection. Dr. Keller's thin smile was unsettling in its tranquility. Your deductive process fascinates me, Monsieur Poirot. The beauty of the solution, the elegant transformation of crude theft into intellectual artistry. Surely you appreciate the achievement. I understand the vanity that destroys exceptional minds, Poirot replied with genuine sadness. You possessed remarkable gifts: intelligence, education, professional standing, yet you chose to squander them on criminal enterprise, driven by the need to prove your superiority over lesser mortals. The arrest proceeded with quiet dignity, Dr. Keller offering no resistance as Captain Martel applied restraints. His pale eyes remained fixed on Poirot with what might have been respect, the recognition of one intellectual by another despite their opposing purposes. Lady Beatrice reclaimed her sapphire with trembling hands, its blue fire catching the afternoon light as if celebrating its return to rightful ownership. The tear of Savoy's unique silk inclusions gleamed with distinctive beauty that no criminal cunning could disguise or duplicate. As evening shadows lengthened across the winter garden, Poirot stood contemplating the elegant architecture of crime and detection that had played out among the exotic blooms and filtered mountain light. The impossible theft had been solved through methodical reason and psychological insight, proving once again that no deception, however ingeniously conceived, could withstand the relentless application of logical deduction. The criminal mind that creates such elaborate puzzles, he observed to Captain Martel as they prepared to depart the Hôtel Belle Étoile, often suffers from the same intellectual vanity that ultimately destroys it. Dr. Keller possessed exceptional gifts, yet he chose to employ them in service of his own superiority rather than human betterment. It is, perhaps, the greatest tragedy of all: genius corrupted by pride. The pristine snow of Mont Blanc stretched endlessly beyond the conservatory windows, eternal and indifferent to human ambition and folly. The vanishing footprints had been explained, the impossible theft solved, and justice served with the precise elegance that characterized all of Hercule Poirot's greatest triumphs. Yet, as the great detective arranged his departure with characteristic precision, his gray eyes held a trace of melancholy for the waste of exceptional talent. In the elegant shadows of the Hôtel Belle Étoile, Truth had emerged like alpine sunrise illuminating previously hidden peaks, beautiful and terrible in its absolute clarity. The little grey cells had triumphed once again, proving that order must ultimately prevail over chaos, and that human ingenuity, however brilliant, cannot indefinitely mock the fundamental laws of justice and truth.